Many people get to experience a beautiful death. Many more get to experience a violent death. They're bombed, they're in a car accident, they're murdered or killed. I've always been curious, what happens to their consciousness? They don't have the time to process. They don't have the time to let go, as that beautiful meditation walked us through. Second part, or second question is, in the Buddhist psychology or in the Buddhist practice, is there any, like in the Christian or Catholic practice, a last sacrament? Is there any special chant? Is there any special prayer? Is there anything to practice at the end that is the equivalent? Yeah.
Thank you. So first, to put some framing, in Buddhism, these chants, these images, these rituals are technologies of the heart. There's a Jungian substrate to the psyche I often reference that speaks in the language of embodiment and story and ritual. So just to frame this by saying that these are elements we use to steer the heart in its deepest times and to hold the most sacred moments. Ajahn Amaro once had a vision of Master Hua, one of the most famous Mahayana monks, coming to him. And Master Hua said, "Bright, loud, and mobile is the false. Subtle and indistinct is the true." Bright, loud, and mobile is the false. Subtle and indistinct is the true. And for me, like, the reason we have so much framing of ritual is because we're holding, you need to protect the subtle and indistinct. It needs a frame. It's like a cathedral. Only by kind of the walls do you hold out the bustle of the street and have room for the rose window, the bloom, and the liturgy to rise. With death, so if you don't believe in rebirth, it's fine. You're not required to be here. In that case, this can just be, how do I experience a beautiful last few moments and one that lets my heart pass away at peace? Because that's one of the biggest gifts you can give people in your life. If you've been with someone who's lived a beautiful ending of their death, I remember my grandma. There's some people, it's like as they near death, their skin almost becomes translucent and the veil becomes very thin and there's just something shining through the eyes. If you can give people that with your death, that is such a gift of equipoise. I also speak about, people are concerned often about dementia, Alzheimer's. Many of us will probably encounter that. And one really important thing to do now is cultivate loving kindness in your life, because that substrate of emotional well-being and brightness lasts beyond the brain's fading, like sunlight illuminating mist at dawn. And Ajahn Pasano, one of my teachers, references meeting Mahagosananda, one of the most famous monks in Thailand, at the end of his life, and his memory was totally gone. But he said all that was left was metta. He was just an avatar of metta. So in traditional theravada folk belief, they say that last moment is key to the next rebirth. It is the distinguishing factor. The the suttas don't quite bear that out. And I'd say a good way to think about the death moment, and this is from the Abhidhamma, but I think it's very good, is you have a herd, a corral of cows, and you've got some black cows, which are bad karma, and you've got some white cows, which are good karma. And your whole life, you're putting cows in that corral. And every now and again, you'll make a really big wholesome action or a really big negative action. That's like a really big cow. That's a really strong cow. And then at the end of your life, you don't know which cow's going to get out of that door first. If there's a lot of strong, bright, happy cows, one of them will probably muscle to the front and make it through. Or if there's a lot of just white cows in there and a few black cows, they might get, odds are the white cow will get out. But so there's a beautiful sutta where the Buddha is trying to put at ease his cousin, Mahanama, around this fact. Although Mahanama was a stream enter, so he was safe in terms of his rebirth. You've had a glimpse of Nibbana, and that irreversibly changes the rebirth process. But he said, but I think this applies to people with faith. He says, Mahanama, don't worry. And Mahanama says, look, I'm afraid if I go in the city and my mind's distracted and I get hit by a cow or There's a lot of cow deaths in the suttas, actually, surprising amount. We're okay right now. But, or a cart, like, I don't know where my mind's going to be. And the Buddha says, do not worry, Mahanama. Just as a pot of ghee dropped in a cool lake would crack open and the shards of clay fall to the ground while the ghee rose like a white orb, even so, when this body lies in the ground broken and consumed by jackals, the mind that's nourished by faith, by virtue, by learning, by wisdom will rise. Your death will be a good one, Mahanama. And I think we can take a lot of heart in that, actually. Like, if you've encountered these teachings, there's such brightness in you. And you remember the Walk for Peace monks. Who's been following that? I know I asked last week. So if you listen to the testimony of the monk who lost his leg, he talks about skidding over the pavement after being hit and being absolutely sure he was going to die. And his mind just became completely calm. And I've heard that very often, is that in those last moments, regardless of exactly how the death happens, often the mind will become very calm in those last moments and old karma come to fruition. If it's a really traumatic death, that's another thing, and we just have to rely on our practice and hope that, do our best to avoid such things. But I'd say that having a lot of faith in those white cows and putting as many as you can in terms of those last moments of death, we do have funeral chants, but I'd say really just reminding yourself of the good you've done. And for people close to you, this is something you can do for them. Like, we had my uncle passed away recently, my step-uncle, and they just had a poster board at the end of his bed with all the images of people he'd loved and things he'd done. And he was very much not a religious man. He had a pile of Buddhist books on his bookshelf, and I said, "Did you read all those, John?" And he said, "Oh, they all have the same plot." I'm not They all have the same plot. Oh, no plot. Yeah, that was hilarious. But people are more open in their last days and months to these things than you might think. And if you have something to give them, even if they've never wanted to talk to you about your Buddhism or your spirituality or whatever the heck you're doing over there in Seattle, knowing that this might be the one chance you have to offer that to them, and better to try, at least gently, for one moment to see. Because I gave my uncle a Buddha image, and it was the last thing he was holding in his hand. And I chanted for him, and he never, he was not a religious man, but that was, in those last moments, people open. And there's a sutta called the Akankeya Sutta, where the Buddha says, if you should wish, when my relatives pass, may they remember me with faith and their heart go to a good destination. Let one fulfill the precepts, not neglect samadhi, meditation, delight in empty huts, practice well. And for me, that's the Buddha clearly saying, even if during your life your relatives and friends and spouse and kids don't get what you're doing because of you, because of religious difference, because of alienation, there's a moment of clarity after death where your practice can impact them and guide them deeply, where there's a vision of clarity. And so yeah, reminding yourself of the good things done, keeping kind of chants going. And then there's a beautiful book online. It's a little booklet called With Each and Every Breath. You can Google it. About Longpo Pasano was called to walk a man named Jay through his execution. He was in San Quentin and had been sentenced to death because of a robbery years before, although evidence kind of pointed to the fact that he didn't actually kill anyone. He just wouldn't give up the person he did it with. And he just Jay meditated hours every day and became one of the most loved people in the prison. And in his last days, Longpo Pasano came to him and counseled him to keep the light nimitta in his heart because the breath would be gone during execution. And yeah, there was a moment at midnight. This is the start of I'm writing Longpo Pasano's biography, and this is the start of it, there's a moment at midnight, it was just storming and raining, and there's a bunch of protesters outside of San Quentin trying to get the execution stalled. And at 12 midnight exactly, the rain stopped on the dot, right when he was executed. and it was silent for a time. So light and refuge. And I talk off sometimes about, I was on Tudong in the jungle in Thailand, and an elephant came when it was dark. My teacher told me, don't go back to your little umbrella tent before 10 p.m. And of course, I had gone back to my umbrella tent by 10 p.m. And was meditating, but still. And I heard this elephant coming from afar, and I really got, it's the most scared I've ever been. They're really dangerous. And it was playing with the tent of a monk next to me who was gone. We asked why later, and Longpor Anand, my teacher, said, oh, they don't like the color blue. There was a blue tarp over it. It's like, huh, okay. But I just took refuge. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa 3 times. And the deepest wave of calm I've ever experienced just rushed through my body, and everything went quiet. And the monk and the elephant wandered off. So take that as you will, but refuge. You have refuge. Another question online, maybe. Mary?
Hi, Ajahn.
Hey.
Hi, it's Mary. Hi. Thank you so much for this, the meditation and the answering of the questions. So I have a question that may be very esoteric and maybe too academic, but it's also very experiential. Going through the death meditation, I'm following right along. We're going through the possessions, the roles, the people, and I'm left with these qualities in my heart space. The really pleasant life, good life lived. And the Citta. So
say that last part again, Mary. You're cutting out briefly. Can you repeat the last 20 seconds of what you were left with in your heart? Mary, can you hear me? Sorry, Mary. Mary?
Did you say that?
Sorry, Mary.
Oh,
You cut out briefly. You're back now. Oh.
Okay.
But can you
were
repeat the
frozen
last 30 seconds? You said what was left in your heart was?
Okay, the qualities of loving kindness, let's say. Okay, but then, so I'm thinking that that's my Citta, that heart space. And then I thought he's, and
Mary, it cut out again a little bit. Can you type it? Everyone was like, gave a collective sigh because it seemed like such a good question. Can you type it? Mary, can you type it into the chat?
Yeah, okay.
While we're waiting for that cliffhanger, everyone, do we have a question in the audience or online?
Is this on? Yeah. During your meditation, I had this image of emptiness as being nothing but love, that everything is filled in with love, and I think that that's kind of where I'm at right now. But that's what I felt, that emptiness is not empty; it's filled with love. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And this maybe echoes a bit of what Mary was beginning to speak to as well, is when you start letting go, you're not left with nothing. And it's the problem with the term empty is, empty of self, but filled with reality. And when the Buddha gives a simile for the enlightened mind, he talks about light that lands on nothing. And it's interesting because we have the triple gem. And the beauty of the triple gem is, instead of reifying the ultimate, which is beyond words, we're given things which refract the light. And you can see it shine through when you read the Buddha's words or see an image or... and it's funny, there's a sutta called, where the Buddha's with a monk on his deathbed called Vakali. And he says, Venerable Vakali, do you have any regrets? And he says, I wish I'd seen you more, Lord. And the Buddha says, what do you care for this putrid body? One who sees the Dharma sees me. The Buddha's still here. I mean, whatever that means, but when you begin to touch that deeper resonance of what you let go, you're not left with nothing. The light, the palm is filled with sunlight. It's more subtle. but you begin to feel that too, and the citta begins to resonate with it. And yeah, in the Buddha draws a very clear line. There's a sutta where someone asks, what's the difference between the formless attainments, the base of infinite space, etc., and the Brahma Viharas, the abodes of loving kindness, and a bunch of other things? And the Buddha says, or maybe it's Venerable Sariputta, but says, there's difference in some ways, but really they're similar in a lot of ways. And greed, hatred, and delusion are absent in all of them. And he says the apex of the heart's release through loving kindness is the beautiful. The apex of the heart's release through compassion is the base of infinite space. The basis of the apex of the heart's release through rejoicing is the base of infinite consciousness. And that can seem like very esoteric and academic, but what I think it means is like there's a back door to the spaciousness and stuff, and it's love. And yeah, if you invoke love in those places when the mind's calm, it's right there waiting for you. You're just unkinking the pipes and making room. It's like a Stradivarius. You don't have to fill the Stradivarius with music. We spend our lives stuffing the Stradivarius full of like tissue paper and all this, love letters, and we just ruin the notes. But just clear it empty and keep the framing, and the note rings on its own. So, yeah, it's good, invoking that. When the mind is calm, that's when you want to bring in those recollections of love, and that's when it'll calm even more. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha says, first you brighten the mind, then the mind calms. So when you find your mind's like very calm with the breath, and you're like, what now? Or a little disoriented, because all of your kind of framework has fallen away, that's when you can drop in a thought of love, and the emptiness becomes a doorway. You're invoking something, and then as the mind becomes, because it's luminous and malleable, it's like dropping a bead of golden dye on a clean cloth. It just permeates out. And once the mind is luminous, then it is willing to concentrate very quickly. Yeah.
I mean, it really describes how to access love.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary, can we check if she managed to type her question? Can you read it out loud and through the mic?
Yes. Did you say to give up the citta? Isn't that what carries on, or is that a misunderstanding? The qualities in the citta and the developed wisdom question.
So, who here knows the word citta? Okay. It means mind, it means heart, it's a bit of both, and it's a notoriously difficult to define term. I once asked Ajahn Jayasaro this question, like, what is the citta? And he said, when I was abbot at Nanachat, I got 2 questions more than anyone else, any others. Where's the bathroom, and what is the citta? and it's important because the Buddha really, the citta is resonant with, you begin to approach this asymptote of language with the citta, where it's not associated with a person. Longpur Sucitta says, people don't become enlightened, cittas become enlightened. And so I don't want to speak about it too much, but I didn't say to give it up. I don't think you could. But the best simile I've heard for it is a pond. And when the Buddha talks about citta, it almost always has often it'll have a quality to it, like the citta with anger, the citta with aversion. And that's like the pond being stirred up with waves. You can see the surface very clearly because of the waves. But as the citta becomes calm, it reflects the sky perfectly. That's wisdom. The natural quality of the citta is clear seeing. So the citta that's completely calm has that quality of wisdom, and it reflects the sunlight. Love, Cheryl. The Buddha said what carries from life to life is craving. Like a flame from one house would jump to another house. And if you don't believe in rebirth, life to life, you can just think about this in your daily life, like the craving that draws us onto new birth as the parent, the victim, the self-righteous, whatever it is, the consumer. But that's craving. They talk about, they've done an analysis of dopamine levels when you're purchasing, and independent origination, the moment of peak dopamine is when you're right at the cash register about to buy the thing. And that's the becoming moment, bhava. And then birth is when you've swiped the card and you've been born. So it's craving that carries. But as to where the citta fits into that, the Buddha was really clear that it's it gets to a place beyond words. Yeah. So yeah, you can't give that up. But you do, that practice lets you feel more of the Citta's resonance because you've let go of what's not the Citta more and more. And you feel brightness and love and wisdom and lightness. That's all there, spaciousness. I think we have another, please. I'll wait for a mic. Let's get to the Zoom people. Second. No, it's fine.
Hi, I'm Ren. Thanks. I was just thinking about the pragmatics. You know, you mentioned the hospital room, and I was thinking about, you know, the distractions. You know, like, you know, you got the people next door, they're on the other side of the curtain, and then you got the TV, and then you've got maybe pain and pain meds, and then I was thinking about 100 Years of Solitude, like drifting, like the desire to drift, really, and fantasize. You know, and I was thinking, God, you know, on my deathbed, will I still have the same struggle to stay in the moment? So, you know, there's just pragmatic concerns, I guess. See if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that there's not a TV blaring next door to you in this image. I mean, part of the pragmatics is, yeah, like one thing they have in Thailand, they have such a more wholesome relationship to death in Thailand than they do in the West. Like, people see death, and, you know, in the West, like, health insurance gets you a lot of amazing things, and if you're not careful, yeah, it can end your life, you know, being shocked repeatedly, you know, going to code again and again and trying to keep you alive at any cost. And people can navigate that as they will, but I think it is worth really taking into account how and where you want to die, if you can have any agency in that, and how, you know, when people should let you go. Because I think those things do influence you in the end. I think with pain meds, you know, the practicalities of, like, what's the most clarity you can have? And sometimes pain will be destroying your clarity, and sometimes, you know, but really drugging someone up with an amount of, you know, morphine or something where they're completely, your mindfulness is gone, like, that's not great. And often pain's what lets us let go of the body a little bit in life. But I've honestly never been through these things, and I can't speak to chronic pain. So I think everyone has to navigate that one for themselves. But I'd say you pointing to the metric of clarity is really significant. And yeah, like, whatever supports you can have. I know people who play chanting repeatedly. I know people who really have. There's a man in Thailand, Ajahn Jayasaro, talks about visiting. He was on his deathbed, and he'd taken a picture of every senior Ajahn that had visited Wat Pananachat. He'd taken a picture with them, and he had just a book of all the pictures of him with these monks he loved. And he just would turn through it day after day and, like, just remember the goodness in his life. And whatever you can do to kind of remember that goodness, yeah, I think that's really relevant. So yeah, I don't know if that addresses exactly what, but taking into account those external elements is, I think you're right, it's important. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe one more. Kirk. Gail, please. Sangvara. Gail's attending to her dog, Annie, who's close to passing away.
So I thank you, Ajahn. I love this meditation, and it's dovetails so nicely with those of us doing the 5 invitations. This is, so I just wanted to comment on that. And I find it such a relief to visualize lying there and giving up everything. And there was just a warmth that came to me this time. And I guess I felt supported and non-judgmental, like I've done all these things in my life that I regret, or it was, no, I didn't go there, and felt surrounded by much more metta. And so because she's pretty much on doggy hospice, I wanted to thank you, Ajahn, and everybody, in the Sangha that's reached out to me and is sending us metta, because it's just making, hold on, I'm going to just see if I can pick her up and everybody can see her. Just a sec. So it's, she's just being such a good dog. And yeah, my heart is just so touched by all of your care and this community. Thank you so much. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, Gail. Let's give 3 big sadhus for, I wish we had a better word for this one right now, actually, but let's say metta. How about that for Annie? 3 times. Metta, metta, metta. Annie's got so much Buddhist love coming her way.
Yeah.
People caring for an animal dying, I mean, it's, as a pet, that's winning the jackpot of like having someone pour that much goodness into you at the end of a life. And in terms of the animal realm, which in Buddhist conception is very fraught and frightened and difficult, having the rebirth of a pet in a Buddhist household like that's really something. There's a funny Buddhist joke. All dogs are set to be reborn as humans next life, so they're like really excited about it. But cats have just been reborn as humans, so they're like, not that, not that interested. All right. I think that's what we have time-wise. If people have anything else they want to talk about, obviously you can talk to me now. You can come to our Wednesday evening Zooms. If you have anything private you want to talk about, just message Ajahn Kovilo or myself on Wednesday evening Zoom, and we'll stay on after and talk with you. And if you ever want to come down to Alms around at 7 a.m., weekdays, I know it's early, but Ajahn Kovilo or myself will be there most weekdays. Check the calendar, and we can just talk for an hour or something. Thank you all. I also want to bring into our, well, actually, this is a good time for it. Let's read the blessing.